right, modern math teacher. On a scale from 1 to 4, how well do you understand standards based grading? All right, well, that may be a little bit of a trick question for you here. Welcome to another episode of Poolside PD, quick and easy episodes where we give you bite sized PD about the topics you ask me most about. Remember, anytime you want to suggest a topic, just find me over on socials at more than just X, more with 2 O's, or you can always find me in the Modern Math Teachers Facebook group. All right. So today, you guys, we're going to give a quick overview of standards based grading. In last week's episode, we talked about equitable grading practices in general, and I promised we'd go just a little bit deeper with standards based grading because that's a really popular topic in our community. So, we're going to talk about what standards based grading is, what some of the common issues are, common challenges are when switching to standards based grading, and some resources for those of you who want to explore it further. All right, if you want to hear all about standards based grading, grab your favorite beverage, hit the poolside chair, whatever you got going on there, and let's dive in. Okay, so if we're going to talk about this, we want to first get on the same playing field by defining what standards based grading is. It is often used interchangeably with like a lot of different terms: mastery based grading, competency based grading, and it can get kind of confusing. So, we're going to use one definition for this, and that is according to Otis, standards based grading, also known as SBG, is a system that evaluates students' progress towards mastering specific learning targets called standards. Okay. These standards can be set at a national, state, or school levels. A lot of us are familiar with the Common Core state standards, although you may not all have it beautifully bound like I do here if you're watching me on YouTube. Okay. SBG, standards based grading, focuses on students' mastery of those specific learning goals rather than just awarding grades based on an accumulation of points. So, this is one of the equitable math practices or grading practices that we shared about in last week's episode. Standards based grading really emphasizes the importance of clear learning targets and providing meaningful feedback to students. So, did you hear that, you guys? That means we've really got to focus in on communicating, especially when we're switching to standards based, okay? Communicating those clear learning goals is crucial. Your students need to understand what they're expected to learn and achieve, and your communication and feedback to them helps them figure out where they are along that path to developing proficiency or mastery. Okay, so that's what standards based grading is. It's when you're using a standard, whether it's set at a national, a local, or a school based level, and you are going to be awarding students or giving students feedback to let them know what level of mastery they are at in terms of demonstrating proficiency with that skill. So let's talk about 3 challenges. One is converting to a traditional gradebook because a lot of you have ideas to go standards based, but you're still in the confines of a traditional gradebook. Two is thinking about the overwhelming number of standards. Guys, if you're not here on YouTube, I have this entire book. It's 81 pages long of a bound book with the Common Core state standards in it. So, guys, I get it. There's a lot, okay? But we can overcome that. And number 3, helping our students shift that mindset. So, those are the 3 challenges we are going to talk about today. Challenge 1, let's go back to the beginning. And this is one that comes up the most frequent with teachers who have just been told, like, hey, you're going to switch to standards based grading, but our student information system isn't going to change. Whew. Okay. So, a lot of teachers struggle with translating standards based into percentage based grades. That's just a fact. So, when you do this, you want to choose a method that makes sense for you and your teaching style and stick with it. Okay? There is no one right way to do this. I just want you to find one way that you think makes the most sense. Talk about it with your department, talk about it with your school, and then stay consistent with it. All right? In my teaching career, I have used a lot of different strategies to remedy this like dissonance. Okay. So I've kept portfolios of student work and I've updated paper grade books. Every time they demonstrated higher mastery on something, I would change the grade in my paper grade book before I had to go put it into the actual formal system. I've also done something similar with Google Sheets when I transitioned from a paper gradebook and became more proficient with Google. And this worked really well when I was using a gradebook system that was set up for standards based grading. But since transitioning to a more traditional school district with a traditional SIS setup, I've had to match up those percentages and the mastery levels. You guys, you can go down an intense rabbit hole Googling all the different ideas for what percentages match up most closely with the mastery levels. So there's a lot of ideas out there about what are the best numbers to use. Again, that's where I want you to find one that resonates with you, pick it and use it consistently. I personally have been using a level 1 as a 65%, a level 2, 75%, a level 3. Remember, that's our target here is 85%. Level 4, 95%. Okay. So, a quick look online will give you a variety of options. Just pick one that aligns most with your personal teaching beliefs. You are an expert teacher. I'm not going to tell you how to run your classroom. I'm just giving you ideas for things that you can tweak to make a little bit better. Okay, so that's overcoming that dissonance with the traditional gradebook. Number two, let's talk about the overwhelming number of standards that there are. Okay, teachers often worry about their gradebook becoming way too cumbersome because there are so many standards that we teach, guys. So many standards, right? So when you're thinking about all the standards, they're already grouped. Okay. If you go into the Common Core State Standards, you find numbers and quantity, algebra, functions, modeling, geometry, stats, and probability. Okay. I want you to think about creating bundles of these standards. So bundle those standards into like power standards or competencies or themes, and then have those supporting standards. That's going to help you streamline your grading and focus on key learning goals. So I've grouped standards together into mathematical competencies with specific focuses. For example, I have a linear equations competency. So students had to be able to identify and calculate the slope and the intercepts. They had to write equations. They had to graph these equations. They had to solve with these equations. Okay. Each of those skills or concepts fell into different levels of difficulty and therefore like different numerical scores on their proficiency scale, on that 1, 2, 3, 4 scale. Each of those things that I mentioned, identifying and calculating slope, intercepts, writing, graphing, modeling, all of those are different individual standards, right? I bundled them all into one, just thinking about it kind of like a unit, a linear equation unit, a linear equation standard there, okay? So something you could think about is bundling these things. When you're creating these groupings of standards, though, you want to make sure that you unpack them, okay? And what I mean by that is you need to note down what the students need to know, what skills they need to be able to demonstrate, how they're going to reason and apply that knowledge, and what products they might need to make for demonstration of that standard. This helps make it so much more student friendly too, okay? So if you're switching to standards based grading, and you need some help with figuring out how to unpack those learning goals. That's a training that I've been through and I've helped countless teachers with. So I went ahead and I made the mastery skills checklist. It's a PDF that guides you through doing this on your own. So you don't have to wait and like have me come in and do a training or anything. Download this PDF, the Mastery Skills Checklist. I'm going to drop it here in the show notes. And it's your guide to creating your own mastery skills based on my 13 plus years of writing them for myself and co creating them for others, both in math classes and beyond. Again, I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. Okay, so that's challenge number two, the overwhelming number of standards. And again, our solution, we're going to bundle them together and then unpack them into student friendly language so that when we make the switch, our students say, oh, okay, this is what I can do. This is what level of mastery that demonstrates. And here's how I can advance myself. Okay. And that brings us to challenge number three, which is addressing the student mindset shift. We have already looked at two challenges on the teacher side, the grade book, which we talked about how to put in percentages for that, and bundling our standards so that it's not an overwhelming number. Now we're going to take a look at what the student side is for that. So, students are used to the traditional grading system. They're used to turning things in, getting zeros if it's missing, getting extra credit if they want. This classroom doesn't let that happen, okay? Because you're switching to standards based, you're switching to a more mastery based approach. So, our students are going to struggle at first seeing their grades as a measure of current proficiency and not just a final verdict and end all be all. Like, I got a 75% on this, one and done, I'm moving on. They're going to see that too. And you're going to give them feedback on how they're going to progress to demonstrate further levels of competence with that mastery. So, you want to make sure that you are super, super intentional with discussing the shift early and often with your students. You want to talk about it right at the beginning of the year. You want to reinforce it every time you give some sort of assessment where they're going to be getting those grades back in that 2, 3, 4 assessment ranking. Anytime you want your students to self assess, you guys need to have the conversation until it's embedded in their heads and they really understand what that means. Okay. You want to reinforce that idea that the grades reflect their progress and their areas for growth, and they're not just an end all be all right away. Okay. So, those are our three big challenges that most teachers face when switching to standards based grading. Now, let's talk about all the worthwhile things that SBG, standards based grading, allows you to do, because it really is a fantastic system if it's one you're thinking about implementing. If you're this far in and you're thinking, all right, so I might want to give standards based grading a try, or your admin team has already decided that for you, because I know for some of you that is true, I'm here to share some of Dr. Marzano's 6 strategies from his book, The New Art and Science of Teaching. This was like my holy grail when I first started doing standards based grading or mastery based and competency based grading. All of that, right? I told you it's all under a bubble. Okay. So this book, well loved. Definitely going to link it in the show notes. You need it if you're thinking about this. Here are his 6 strategies to help you get ready for standards-based grading. Okay, let's talk about them. 1, clearly articulate your learning goals. Guys, I said that already. Communication is key. Make sure your students know what they are expected to learn. Transparency is key. 2, create scales or rubrics for these learning goals, okay? That's where you want to develop the clear criteria for assessing student progress. That's where you want to unpack the standards, put it in student-friendly language, see where it falls on that mastery scale. 3, implement routines for using targets and scales. Regularly reinforce and use these tools in your instruction. That's where you're constantly talking about it with your students. You're giving them tools so that they can track and monitor their own mastery. You're talking to them about it. You're having them discuss where are you at, what kind of feedback can you give them to push them to the next level. Okay. 4, use teacher created targets and scales. Again, this goes back to that checklist I mentioned for you guys. Customize these tools to fit your specific classroom needs. You are the expert of your classroom. You are the expert of your students. You're the expert of your content. You're the expert of your classroom. Okay. Adjust it to fit your needs. Use your professional judgment. I believe you've got what it takes. You know what it is that you need to do with your students. So use those teacher created targets and scales. And again, customize them to fit your classroom needs. And again, create them as student friendly scales so that they can understand them too. They don't need to know all the fancy jargon in there. Put it in student friendly language that ensures your students can easily understand and use the scales as they are developing their mastery along the way. And 6, identify individual student learning goals. Guys, you get to tailor the learning goals to meet the needs of each student. It is awesome. Okay. So those are the 6. Clearly articulate your learning goals. Create scales or rubrics for these learning goals. Implement routines for using targets and scales. Use teacher-created targets and scales. Create student-friendly scales. And identify individual student learning goals. Okay. 6 strategies to get you started. Now, I also want to talk about, just for a minute, the 1 to 4 scale, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about what this is. So if you are following Dr. Marzano's work, the 3.0 is your target learning goal. This is the grade level expectation. And I get a lot of pushback from people that, why isn't that the 4? And then a 4 is 95. And if a student is meeting expectations, why are they not getting an A in the class? Why is it now an 85? That's because standards-based grading isn't designed to fit into a traditional gradebook, guys. It's just not, right? That's why I said use your professional judgment on those percentages over there, okay? Okay. All right, so if you're using Dr. Marzano's work, 3.0 is the target learning goal. That's what it is. 2.0 is a simpler learning goal. Sometimes those are those skills that are like scaffolded in there. So like being able to figure out what slope is right before you can write an equation. That is a simpler learning goal that's going to get us up to that next level of proficiency. Okay. Okay. All right. And then the 4.0 then is the more complex learning goal. This involves like in-depth inferences and applications beyond what was taught. So they're not just mimicking back to you. I know a lot of you are thinking about building thinking classrooms right now, right? We don't want our students to become mimickers. That does not work. We want to push them beyond that to be able to model and explore and use mathematics in new and novel situations. And that's where that 4.0 comes in. Okay. Whew. We're almost 50, or I think we're exactly like 15 minutes in right now. And I told you Poolside PD is short and sweet. So again, resources for some further exploration for you. If you are thinking about standards-based grading, you must get the new Art and Science of Teaching by Robert Marzano. There's just so much goodness in here that you can unpack. Just, from figuring out how to write these standards to how to use them for lesson design, like just a book you have to have. Okay. Also, episode 10, I talked about introducing students to mastery based grading. So if it's something you're using, go listen to episode 10. Again, I'll link it here in the show notes. That's going to give you an idea of how to introduce that to your students and get that reinforcement going and going and going. And also, if you are using mastery-based, standards-based grading, you can check out my TPT store for the levels of understanding. It features mastery-based grading posters to keep the transition visible, right? We got to talk about it over and over again. And it helps remind both teachers and students of the goals. It's available in 5 different colors and a variety of patterns because variety is the spice of life, to mix and match no matter what your classroom aesthetic is. Whew. All right, y'all. Keeping it under 20. So let's wrap this up. Today, we covered the basics of standards-based grading, what it is, okay? We talked about key challenges, the gradebook, the overwhelming number of standards, and the shift of student mindsets. And we talked about some practical strategies straight from his book. We had 6 strategies all about implementing standards-based grading, and we got to know the 1 through 4 scale just a little bit better. So I've got one question for you right now. On a scale of 1 to 4, how well do you understand standards-based grading? I bet you're not quite at a 4 yet, but hopefully this helped move you just a little bit in the right direction and gave you a better idea if you would think standards-based grading is going to be right for your classroom. So let me know where you are at, if this is something you are going to be using in your classroom, by hitting me up at More Than Just X on all the socials, or leave a rating and review and share your feedback with me there. Thanks so much for joining me today, you guys. Keep soaking up the sun, keep enjoying that much deserved time away from school, and as always, friends, keep it real.